Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
First Sentier Investors are a global asset management group managing $247.3 billion of assets as of the 30th September 2021. They have 17 independent teams operating across equities, fixed income, listed, and direct infrastructure and multi-asset, led by principles of responsible investment and stewardship. They are home to FSSA Investment Managers, an Asian and global emerging markets equities investor. Stewart Investors, a pioneer in emerging market equities and sustainable investing, and Real Index Investments, a systematic equities manager.
Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and today I'm joined by Shane Light. G'day, Shane.
How are you today, Fraser?
Tremendous. Thank you for asking. Welcome to the show. Now, let's start with a little bit about you. You're one of the partners, I guess we could say, at the Hopkins Group. Tell us about the Hopkins Group.
Yeah, the Hopkins Group is a wealth management company, diversified, I guess, model whereby, the core relationship sits with a financial advisor. However, we have relationships in-house. We're subject matter experts where we can, I guess, add value through, an accounting relationship, mortgage relationship, property, and sort of other different sort of relationships where we can help provide holistic type of advice.
Yeah, amazing. It's got so many different arms to your business. How many staff you got?
Staff at the moment, so this includes, I guess, our offshore sort of support as well, so which we've sort of increased lately. So probably about 60, I would dare say, across the business.
Yeah, pretty decent size. And in Victoria mostly?
Yeah, Victoria mostly. We've got a couple spotted around different states, past staff that have left us or left Australia. We're actually working outside of Australia for us as well. So because, again, we can retain good talent with all the technology available to us these days.
Got to love high-speed broadband, that's for sure. Now, let's go back in time. We've known each other for quite a while. Tell us about how you got into this profession in the first place.
Yeah, well, failed soccer career. Back after school, I guess 2002, I started working in an accounting business. As my dad would always say, can't rely on your professional football career. So after doing a bit of a stint overseas, come back and was offered a reception role, believe it or not, so front of house with an accounting, it was actually account business. So it was, again, one of those one-stop shops, as Mr. Lambert would like to say. And from that perspective, I guess the career was just born from engagement, and I want really to be an accountant. Sort of did my accounting sort of qualifications, moved to mortgages, so learnt a lot about the Credit Act back then, did my MFAA sort of training and education, and a role came up in financial planning. So having, I guess, those different areas of sort of background, I fell into financial planning early on, and then it wasn't too soon before I actually headed out of Wollongong. I wanted to head to the big smoke, and then spent 9 years in compliance and legal.
Yeah, and 9 years in compliance and legal. You say that like it rolls off the tongue, but that's not really such a small thing. Tell us about compliance and legal, because obviously that's accounting, mortgages, background, bit of financial advice. Tell us about you. I think that's probably where I first met you in compliance and legal. But tell us about that part of your life. Yeah,
compliance and legal was a different one. I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was sort of at school. So reading legislation for myself, obviously, was what I enjoyed doing. When I was offered that role again with Count, I spent sort of 5 years, traveling around Australia. I was obviously based in Sydney back then, through Victoria, Western Australia, obviously Queensland later on when I met you with a different business. It was very challenging to be on the other side of the fence, providing feedback and looking through advisors' files at that time, which were probably twice or three times my age and senior, who had been in the industry again, probably 4 or 5 times longer than what I ever would have. So it was challenging, but again, a lot of relationships, just being, commercially sensible and just having a different approach, obviously, I believe anyway, to that compliance side of things, which has obviously benefited me in my career and maintained such relationships with advisors, having flipped back, I guess, into the advice side of things.
Yeah, it's certainly it's a difficult piece of work to be involved in the compliance side, isn't it? Because it's I guess you're holding the measuring stick up, but you're also trying to educate and encourage. But sometimes the whole thing around compliance is it sort of feels like it gets tougher and tougher and tougher and tighter and tighter.
Yeah, it does. So, I mean, I joined just after FSR, so we're going back to 2001. So, we'll talk about a lot of legislative changes even over the last 12 months. But since 2001 to now, I've lost count, and how many times or a year specifically legislation has changed. If we were to talk to our partners in their respective occupations, I don't think such change has been experienced across any other industry, or has had, I guess, the involvement, or I guess, of the government, and the impacts on overall family life as well and well-being that, this industry has seen.
Yep. So you work for a number of licensees in that sort of compliance governance role, sort of head of advice type roles. In that sort of looking around and seeing what all these different practices do, and then understanding how they work and how they can probably improve, because it's not just about compliance, it's about sort of saying maybe there's a better way you can do it based on what you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what was really good about the roles is I could go into a small business who was a sole operator, who may not be working as efficient as they could be, having stepped out of another business which could have been quite large, with multiple advisors with a large support staff who had invested in technology to deliver those services or bring those services to the clients at a lower cost, and just being able to sort of take what that business is sort of doing without breaching any confidentiality to say, hey, have you considered doing something a different way, and hopefully add value, not just, coming in and sort of, as you said, waving that big stick, but yeah, and hopefully walking away and being able to change the way that they're doing business moving forward. And there was definitely a lot of that through that period of time, because there was so much technology advancement through it used to be X-Plan, then Midwinter, and as it all evolved, obviously we see where the industry is today, and it's just forever evolving.
Yeah. Now you spent some time, obviously, with working with licensees, understanding what the drivers were, understanding what the pressures were from a licensee, being a responsible manager, and going down that path. Tell us about the sort of the responsible manager, the job as a responsible manager.
Well, I mean, people sort of, we always talk about what ifs. It's always a risk-based approach. And I guess when we're sitting in that compliance and legal side of things, and I probably did more of a risk-based approach with Aon, so where I met you, is that sitting at a different sort of level, which is your corporate legal kind of thing. So you're not sitting within the legal structure of the license. You are literally looking at the risk basis. So when you are reviewing or talking to advisors, it's not always black and white. This is the Corps Act. This is, the responsibilities that you have. If you do something wrong, you're impacting the X amount of other advisors that are on the license. So it's a different conversation, no different to, I guess, the conversation I have today in the Hopkins Group is that, we're just one business in a larger AFSL, but at the same time, if me out of 8 other advisors or another one of those 8 advisors does the wrong thing, then they need to understand the repercussions it has, not only on the other people in the business, but the business reputation, obviously the significant damage it can do the brand reputation, obviously the client's loss of trust, which is so important in this environment, but obviously the overarching AFSL and, the support it provides to the other advisors as well, which it could really, really damage.
Yeah, it all stacks up, doesn't it? And it's all, everyone's part of the team, and if one person lets the team down, it's very much a team sport. Tell us about how did you get into the Hopkins Group? Tell us about your entry into that business.
Yeah, the Hopkins Group. I dare say it was probably my wife at the time. I was travelling around quite a bit, actually. I was working with Wellshore, which sort of no longer exists now, on an enforceable undertaking. One of only that was probably it was seen through and they got off or released. But as a result of that enforceable undertaking, I was traveling, 1 week out of sort of 2 or 3, like every second or third week for a block at a time, I was away. And at that point in time, we were due for a, first child. So my wife wasn't too impressed that I was traveling so much so that I could be in, Sydney one day, Canberra the next, and then back in Western Australia, and then back to Victoria, all in 1 week. That's how crazy it was, because basically when you're in an enforceable undertaking, with so many sort of resources and then advisors, like, you are just doing what the regulator, wants you to do. And I was lucky enough to obviously have one of the largest businesses, which was the Hopkins Group at that point in time. And, being able to sort of, I guess, nurture them and provide feedback to them, because being larger and provision of more, types of style advice, I guess the risk metric goes up. So from that point of view, and being able to work with them and reorganize that business and reshape them, they liked what I did. Bit of a, tongue-in-cheek conversation about sort of, like to become an advisor and sort of move back in that sort of role. And, that just happened. Happened so quick, actually, that I was working part-time from the license and part-time for the Hopkins Group, that both businesses were happy for me to do that, to slowly remove me out of, I guess, the AFSL into full-time advising.
Yep. So it's an amazing opportunity, obviously, but you have to take it, right? You have to mention it, have the idea, and then see it through. And it sounds like a really nice transition. Tell us about that. So you just went in there though as a salaried advisor?
Yeah, you're right. So, well, actually, I started off as the head of advice. So the initial role was the head of advice. So I had sort of 3 components to my role, but the primary component was basically the management and the overarching sort of redirection or reshaping of the business. So this was back in 2015, where I literally ripped apart everything, and even back then, we removed, all or majority of asset-based fee charging, reshaped, contracts and, the fee disclosure back then, how we advise clients. We even looked at, reshaping technology, the X plan, so how we can provide efficient advice using the software and tools available in the marketplace, because obviously the business was still a little bit archaic back then. There was sort of that aspect of things. Second was the compliance, and then third was, you're right, it was advising. But I sort of only started off with sort of 50 to 70 clients even back then, because the role obviously of running the business, mentoring other advisors, also having other staff in paraplanning and support roles report through to me, that took up a lot of other time as well.
Yeah. When you started there, did you have conversations with them about, becoming a part owner in the business or a partner in the business, or was that something you had later?
That it wasn't even on the cards initially. So going in sort of, as I said, as a staff member, to think that I'd end up back in an advising role back then was, again, I probably wouldn't even think about it. I mean, my natural direction back then probably would have been maybe with AFCA or someone like that, with my compliance and legal background and working on complaints, because I did a lot of that when I was at Aon with the corporate counsel. But yeah, so sort of going into this role, really it was just, here's the role. It's quite larger than what I've previously obviously ever done. Not too dissimilar to managing a group of advisors, but technically this is staff and clients. But no, that discussion came a couple of years later, and that was sort of off the back of Rachel and Michael also wanting to not specifically unlock equity, to look at other business opportunities, i.e. what we're doing today with other advisors and businesses and merging them in. But I guess, rewarding my hard work and sort of, being one of the first shareholders outside of ever, Michael and Rachel or Michael and John Hopkins. It was pretty special for them to come to me and offer that, and still there today, 6 years onwards.
Yeah, so it's a large business, been around a long time. What does it look like sort of now with different advisors buying in, and what's the model now for that transition period of equity and growing the business and having advisors be an owner or partner in the business?
Yeah, the model is these days. So we enjoy people of it, all walks of life. Sorry, but the advisors having sort of an existing client book, then there's a responsibility and the keenness to not only continue to grow and support their revenue, but then obviously have more of a link to the overall business success if they're tied to it. But normally it's sort of a 2-year try before you buy type of period. So we sort of arrange valuations at the outset. But it's sort of over that first 24 months that we sort of then go, yep, with regular reviews, do we suit one another enough, let's say for the Hopkins Group to then go, we will now swap your existing clients and the value at, whatever the agreed value is for a piece of equity, which will then obviously be X value at a certain point in time. So it's more, we don't want to give it from the outset, but we all want to hopefully be able to seem to work together to grow something that is larger. And then also at that point in time, there is the offer of, yes, here's the value of your clients. Would you like to buy more? And I guess, depending on how that all works, because we've probably got now 4 or 5 different advisors with equity that have been with us for now 2-3 years, which is excellent, and have come from running their own businesses to now obviously a partner and a shareholder of the Hopkins Group. That allows us to build up additional funds as well to go out and look at purchasing maybe advisors that just want to exit the industry. So that's also a piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, there's also obviously lots of ways to grow the business. That's a really interesting part, though, for advisors that own 100% of a smaller pie, then come in and own a smaller percentage of a much larger pie, though, but the equity value is bigger, and obviously, a more stable business that can share resources and do all the things that it does, and have other opportunities in other arms that we mentioned before. When it comes to valuations, this is a really interesting part, though, because it's sort of there's ups and downs in valuations. Do you guys have a particular valuation methodology? And obviously it's probably easier when you've got, you're buying and selling to just continue with a methodology, and it's easier to then value the business?
Yeah, look, we try and keep the equal value or methodology the same on both ends. So if it's 2.5 times or 3 times or whatever it is, then that's it, right? And we do that on both databases. But I guess our methodology has sort of been proven over time where, depending on the age of the clients, depending on the type of policies they have, where their money sits, is it in older sort of legacy products, as to what value or multiple they get, same as us. So, engage, fee for service, year in, year out, they're your higher valued clients. But, some of the stuff we're seeing with, your group policies that we're sort of taking on, to have to re-engage and build that relationship, they're a lesser multiple, and for that reason, because we don't know how sticky they are or how serviced or well-serviced they have been in the past. So I guess from that perspective, it's the same prorated all the way down, sort of, above 65 sort of onwards type of thing. And again, methodology is sort of, it's leaning towards the 1.7, 1.8s and sort of so on. But, as long as we have that same methodology across the board, then yeah, we're all understanding that what applies to them applies to us. But I think the important thing to sort of know about how we work as well, you're not just swapping equity in the financial planning business. So the Hopkins Group obviously is sort of enticing that business generally, which doesn't have too many other businesses to work with. So accountancy, mortgages, is that, you're rolling in your financial planning business, but now you also have, and that's for equity in the greater Hopkins Group, which owns shares in the mortgage, the accounting and other businesses. So to potentially, nurture those clients and have them use the other services, which will ultimately, increase the overall value of the business as well.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly right. Now, tell us about those other arms. Tell us, you just sort of mentioned mortgage and accounting. They're obviously the main ones, but tell us about how the relationship between all these businesses work and what they all are.
Well, we provide a lot of self-managed super fund advice as well. We've got more corporate, trust company type of tax sort of business expertise as well. So with the head of accounting there being Rachel Williams, who come from a larger sort of, top 4 accounting practice. So the experience and the knowledge to be able to help clients over and above what your sort of your standard sort of accountant would be with your individual tax returns. Not to say they couldn't, but usually in this day and age, it's like advising. You sort of want to stick to your bread and butter and not sort of go outside of that. So we've built a business where we have those other business services now, which helps support our clients. And that's now including, business sales, so business valuations. And, if we can't do it, then we will engage, a third party business as well, and refer them that way. So, from that point of view, it's really good. Same with mortgages, I guess, is, subject matter expert. It's just doing a health check most of the time. It's not even the business. It's just, if you're paying X rate, when was the last time you reviewed it? Do you need a health check? It's just asking that question, having that ready response, giving it to the client, and then putting it back in the client's sort of, responsibility to sort of action or not action.
So because of the size of the business, you've been able to go out and, source, as you mentioned, the property services and the valuation expert and, the business tax expert, the mortgages expert, the property expert. Tell us about how those relationships then, come in and they obviously some of them been standing for a long time, but how are you bringing new ones in?
Relationships in the way of advisors, or yep,
yeah, just for those external areas or those areas where you're not necessarily the key subject matter expert.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, I had a client that had moved from the US, so had some US tax exposure. Now, we hand on heart do not provide international sort of tax advice, but when you've got other large businesses out there that that's their bread and butter, then we go out and we hunt for them. But we hunt for them in the way because, we may not actually have experience in dealing with them either, because it's very rare that some of these little circumstances pop up. So really it's industry sort of experience. So we ask other people in the industry, have you had this pop up before? If so, who'd you use? So I think there's more camaraderie in sort of leaning on other people in the industry too these days. And then you sort of know, if they've used them, then yep, great, we're comfortable, handing our client to them as well. We're referral free. We don't believe in referral, commissions either way, fees paid either way. So really for us, it's, if we're working with someone, we just know that it's that right expert for our client.
Yeah, it comes back down to what every advisor is doing, and they're looking at helping, and it's about helping in those other areas, identifying and helping. Now, property is a part of your remit as well within the Hopkins Group. Property, and you've got a lot of investment property owners, and also all sorts of things off the back of that too, from rental, contracts, and obviously renters need somebody to rent and contracts in place. Tell us a little bit how that part of the business works.
Yeah, property, again, it's part of the DNA of the Hopkins Group. And we're on 41 years this year, so have been around for a very long time. And if John was listening to this, he'd be very proud as well, because believe it or not, he's still working in the business very strongly. But yeah, look, we've got all types of property, I guess. For us, we've got advocacy. We've also got the real estate side of things now. We've got the valuation side, which becomes pretty important too if we're needing to revalue stuff for self-managed super funds. But we normally don't do our own, so we go out to other businesses and vice versa, because obviously we want arm's length. But the property management business, which is an interesting one, it was hit quite heavily through COVID, obviously. So there was a lot of challenges there, and my compliance and legal background also got me involved in a lot of dealings with the REI and some of those complaint tribunal sort of discussions with our property managers who had zero experience, in negotiations there. And I think I was stretching my knowledge and trying to upskill there. But there is a lot of people that I guess are out there renting, wanting to buy their first home, engage in a lot of our sort of online webinars or our first home sort of toolkits, that we sort of put out there. And it is challenging. So look, whether they, funnel through to our side of the business, it's hard, because sometimes they've only got, $10, $15, $20,000 worth of savings, and it's what's the best thing for them. It may not be buying that first home irrespective. It's other conversations with them. But yeah, it does open up a lot of big opportunities, because at any point in time, we've got 1,000 tenancies, so you can only imagine, if they turn over every 6 to 12 months, our database is quite large. But again, the database is very engaging. So yeah, it does add value.
Yeah, it brings a lot of people into contact with with the business name. It's been. I was saying to someone the other day that rentals has been an interesting thing because obviously it was very difficult to negotiate and kick people out at a certain time when people were losing their jobs. But now the pendulum for me feels like it swung back the other way, and it's now very hard for renters to try and find and hold on to or bid for new properties because it always sort of swings that pendulum, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it's a bit hit and miss in Melbourne. You've got people wanting to take up opportunity of selling units, or smaller sort of property, which has had excellent rental yield. But the problem is when you get 3, 4, 5 in the one unit, it's detrimental to the price and then detrimental to the rental yield. So, there's a lot of things that you don't hear about or it's not spoken about in the media, but it's definitely real down here. So, you may think that, things are sort of upwards or, is pushing strongly, but rent increasing and, market rents prior to COVID, definitely not going to be seen for a little while yet.
Yep. Now, because of the large amount of services that the group offers, obviously there's a lot of different moving pieces to the puzzle, but there's obviously a lot of different clients around, which obviously provides a whole lot of new opportunities for financial planners or the financial planners within your group to talk to new people that sort of already know the brand.
Yeah. So I guess, often referrals won't come through to the financial planning business. They will come through from other relationships, from accounting, mortgage broking, or just purely, from, let's say, home opens or inspections too from the property side. So from that perspective, it does create a different dynamic or a different avenue for clients to come into the business where we may not have had those relationships previously. So from that side of things, it's a big positive.
Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was a lot of there's been so many changes going on over the last few years. You've lived in probably one of the hardest places in the world to live throughout the last sort of couple of years. Obviously, all Victorians will be feeling this in some way. But I wanted to talk to you about the mental health of, the community, the people around you, your own mental health. It's sort of one of those things that we've spoken about before. And if anybody's listening to this and they are struggling with some of the things, then please reach out to some support because, there's a lot of, even the associations can help out with the FPA, the AFA, but the people around you. You've had a bit of a crazy journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, COVID, I didn't even know what COVID existed last year because I was coming back from South Australia. And obviously South Australia is, I've got family over there, I had property over there. But from that perspective, as soon as I arrived back sort of last March, I was in lockdown immediately. So come to the office one day, lockdown. The challenges then just obviously ensued, how to remotely sort of deploy not only staff here in Australia, which was quite easy, but offshore. Our offshore team had never sort of obviously worked from home, let alone the security around it all. And then obviously throw in, all the education, the exams. And I was lucky enough to have done my FASEA exam in South Australia last year, which is quite unusual being from Melbourne. But yeah, the toll and I guess the challenge of being locked up for nearly 2 years, and even for me, not being able to see my family. When I say family, my parents and loved ones, because basically 95% of them are in New South Wales, was the next challenge, obviously, and then the homeschooling. So running an entity and also having close to 30 staff also sort of reporting to me, that emotional toll, not only on myself but other people in the business was. Yeah, just unusual. Never experienced before. So not the extent of it anyway. And obviously, I think Melburnians are probably a little bit more prone to be talking about it currently at the moment, as we're starting to sort of open back up. So I guess, this is why I'm here today is I've got a lot more people sort of, willing to talk about their struggles, but I only feel that it's probably more the Melburnians than it is everyone, because obviously they feel like or we have been through one of the harshest lockdowns and probably lesser people around Australia probably comprehend, I guess, that toll or what it would be like being locked up for that long.
Yeah, exactly right. I think for, there's a lot of industries and we're not discounting any of the health professions or all those sorts of things. But advisors have been through the ringer, haven't they, when it comes to, the changes that have been needed to be taken place. Some people have embraced them, but it's also very difficult to embrace when you are in a COVID lockdown for, like you said, or a lock up for a year and a half. tell us about that concept of other people around. You mentioned sort of other people around the country, but I think people in Melbourne will be able to empathise with that situation. But everyone's sort of dealing with different occupations and then understanding. Tell us a little bit about how, I guess, that mental health pressures just sort of build up, and it can become a spiral out of control sometimes because of the amount of it build up. And what's your experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of the build up, and I know for me, and when I talk about to other colleagues, and it can be other people too that I know that do not work in the profession, I think homeschooling is the biggest one. Like they always assume, which no offense, it's the mum or that motherly type of aspect. I'm unusual. My wife works in a blue collar sort of industry, and so do some other mates' wives actually. So, having sort of the added pressure of homeschooling, I think homeschooling has been the biggest burden on all mums and dads in Victoria. It was only recently we sort of, have a conversation with the school, and they're going through all the staffing stuff. And my daughter, who's now 6, is about 3 to 4 months behind in reading, and hearing that now, even after sort of having, the mental anguish through lockdowns and sort of, or struggling, is that the struggle's real. I couldn't spend or put in time with my daughter the same that the school would have, or the expectations to do that whilst we're in lockdown, whilst we're also attending to whether it's our everyday sort of work needs, which is my staff, my clients, the need to again adhere to all the change and the regulations, which are so significant in themselves, breach reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So, the significance of everything. And again, it's not to say that our industry is too dissimilar. Like I think every industry out there that could not or had to work from home and had to support specifically young kids through homeschooling, it's just a challenge that I think everyone just had to sort of work through themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit hard to comprehend for a lot of other people around the country, maybe if they don't have kids or if they're not from that region. What can we do, I guess, in that respect to the conversations? Part of the conversation today is that we're talking about it, which I think is an amazing thing, which I think we really need to do a bit more of. But what else can we do?
Look, I think the mental health for a lot of people, just in general, a lot of people, I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I think a lot of people are starting to get back out, and work, catch up with family, catch up with friends, catch up with any peers, and they're starting to talk a little bit about things. But I think what we need to do better as people is, and where sort of I failed, and what I've noticed a lot of other people that I'm happy and comfortable in talking to about my own challenges, is that we didn't confide in our other halves probably as much as we should have. And that may be through fear of them not understanding the significance or, the depth or the breadth of what we were going through. And I'm trying to make this as general as possible because, as I said, other industries are, facing the exact same challenges, whether it's, shipping and supply and not being able to sort of get stuff from overseas in a timely manner, just absolutely everything. But I took it for granted that I definitely didn't think, my wife would definitely want to hear it after getting home from work as well, all long days, having the kids bombard her to, hear about my challenges and issues, let alone, dealing with clients who had lost their jobs, So the other challenge, I guess, for being a Victorian advisor is, multiple clients lost their jobs, working with them, what to do, suspending insurance policies, super, it just everything, mortgage repayments, cash flow, like it was just one after another. And you have to be seen, I guess, generally to be that strong, supportive person because you're in that role of, trusted advisor to your clients. So you don't want to be seen weak, if that makes sense. So I guess there's a lot of that as well, I feel, through the community. And then, unfortunately for me, and again, being a young advisor, quite unusual, insurance claims just through the roof. And they weren't mental health, they were cancers, and everything was popping up that had never been popped up before.
Yeah. You mentioned confiding in your partner. That's probably something that a lot of people would sit down and go, oh, that sounds like it's a normal, but I think there is no normal in the space. I think a lot of people then just sort of don't have that opportunity, that time and that space to have those conversations. And they're not always easy conversations to bring up. Have you got any tips or thoughts on what's a good way to start a conversation like that with a partner?
Yeah, it's hard. Probably no alcohol. You want to make sure you're clear-minded. You know, obviously, struggled a fair bit. So for me, the conversations were forced, and it wasn't, just with my wife. People could see that I was obviously sort of struggling mentally. I was just done. I'd probably drained myself. So I just think, if you're getting, to being that bad, it's probably also the other partner sort of being cognizant of this is not you, your energy levels are a lot higher or, stuff like that. So, but for me, I guess I got to a point where I did, I just started talking, and just thought, you know what, it's just too much anymore, without breaching any privacy, because that's not what it's about, right? It's just about the struggles. But I guess the challenge is too, and what I see from our industry, and for other advisors, and I guess we're talking from the advisor perspective because there has been a lot of media on, I guess, everything impacting advisors, and it's all sort of culminating to this year, next year with Fraser exam, and unfortunately the number of deaths that have occurred from a number of things. Is you just need to be open and talkative, communicative, and just make sure that you don't take them for granted, and you're just having those conversations. And it's not, oh no, here's another lot of legislative changes, because every year we see 3, 4, 5, or 6, and they do that every year. But you just got to make sure you're talking about your mental health, or talking about your challenges and struggles, because what I did realise is different perspectives, or the ability for someone else to say, hey, like, have you tried this, or have you thought about doing this? And I guess I'm thinking about it in a way too, because I was managing, team offshore, a lot younger. They were struggling with their mental health, and obviously onshore and their mental health. So, I'd probably more blindsided by my own issues without also thinking about other stuff. So, and by able to removing, some of the, it's about me or my issues, and sort of bringing in sort of all the other sort of bigger picture type of conversations, it's sort of, I removed, I guess, the more, I guess the issues sort of centered on myself, and that sort of started to help me a little bit by having those conversations a little bit more openly. And I guess what we noticed too is, as a team, so it's not just about my wife, is once our team and our business also started to have a chat about, I guess, that, and have a sort of a bit of a well-being, pep talk, because I think it's evident, like, everyone was struggling, and people felt a little bit more comfortable about having that chat with one another. And it's amazing how supportive people can be, especially, and it's a shame that we have to all be going through stuff, I guess, at the same time altogether to seek that support. Would we have received that support from, let's say, someone else if we had reached out interstate? I'm just saying, and, over media, and everything was done again, virtually. Would we have received that same support? Probably not, because the experience and the empathy probably is not there because they haven't gone through it.
Yeah, I think experience and empathy and understanding is a huge part of this. You mentioned the states. I've also noticed there's a big divide. Great way to divide states is by, divide humans is to put a state line and talk about our state's better than yours, or doing better at such and such, or all that crap that went on. And you're right about teams and well-being, like understanding and like you, as you mentioned earlier, you felt like you had a leadership position, you had people relying on you, and you felt like so there you couldn't then show any weakness. It's not though showing weakness, is it? It's more around saying, well, if you're burdening more with responsibility, you're still a human at the end of the day, you're still going to feel stuff. Yeah,
but it goes even further too. Like, you're right. It is a sense of responsibility, but then they also feel that, and there's a stigma. So the issue is there's a lot of stigma, I guess, against mental health, right? So, and I've always thought, don't share, don't talk. But obviously, this whole event, and there's so many people I've spoken to, and, it's prompted me, you speak up about it, because we are a large business. We have suffered. A lot of people have suffered. I have, I have definitely gone through my fair share. But it's the clients. I guess it's the perception. Is what happens if my clients find out? Or what happens, is it reputational damage? I mean, in our industry, we don't want our clients to see or feel that we're weak as well. So, by talking about it or more broadly, will that get out, and, will people share that information? So I guess there's a raft of issues that probably need to be dealt with or spoken about. But again, it's going to have to be that person that's sort of now recognizing that their mental health has gotten that bad that they do need to talk about it, because if they don't, then it's only going to eat them alive, and it's going to cause more issues, unfortunately.
Yeah, the stigma is a really interesting thing, and I also think about it from the the what's professionalism point of view, and what is a professional is expected to do, and you sort of have this idea of the professional in a suit, standing there being bulletproof and not everything just being deflecting off and being able to act calmly and rationally in all that situation. But I think the authenticity to me these days, my opinions changed on what that professional. That ideal professional looks like. And to me these days it's all around, acting in the best interest, obviously, but being real and being authentic and being true to yourself, and then standing tall, saying this is me, this is how I am as a human, but I can also behave in a professional manner. I don't have to, like, the behavior of a professional is different from the human the human that is the professional.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, the way I got around it with my clients, without, sort of divulging too much, is we were working. So, I mean, technology can be good and bad, right? So, you work from 9 to 5 with technology. It doesn't work like that. Like, if we're seeing clients with technology, we're then on technology again with the emails and everything else. And it's all technology, but what would be a 5 or 10 minute sort of meeting with someone sitting in the office from a desk across from you is now another 20 or 30 minutes virtual meeting online, just to sort of move things around. And it created a lot more time spent online, but we were working longer hours. So the merging of your professional and business life was then merging into your personal life. Like, so work, home, personal, professional, and not being able to leave home because we had the curfew and just absolutely, all those other sort of compounding factors is, I think clients were really receptive at the end of the day. And I was saying, I'm not taking any calls. My phone's going off at 6. Like, it was literally going off. And I'm pretty strong these days, actually, still now, that I've sort of built that into my, and my clients are really receptive now, because I think they started to realize, not from their side of things, but even their work. Like, I've got a lot of clients that I would also see and meet with, and you could see that they were tired. So they were also having the same probably impacts that the technology was having on us, is that, they were experiencing it as well. It's just technology overload.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great thing, but having a separation, in our life, whether it's, the separation between going to work and coming home, or the separation of something, and, being able to identify. And I guess we have, over the last few years, everything's happening in the one place, working from home, homeschooling, all that technology. Tell us about one of your, I know that you do a lot of, I want to talk about the beekeeping side of it. How do you use that concept to be able to get out of the house and do something that's completely different, and just be able to, breathe some fresh air and tell us about your beekeeping responsibilities.
Yeah, well, as a beekeeper, we were permitted because they are agriculture and livestock. We didn't actually use the permits too much through the height of COVID, because our bees are kept literally 5 kilometres one way and sort of 100 metres another way. But yeah, we've got about 60 beehives, 3 different farms, so 20 kind of thing. It's just worked out that way. And a couple of swarms at our home at the moment that we nurture and then sort of move outside the 5Ks and bring back. But bees have been proven to be really good, I guess, mentally. Just sitting there and watching a beehive is phenomenal, and listening to them when there's no wind. And today's a perfect day. It's, beautiful and sunny here in Melbourne with no wind. If I was sitting out there just with the bees and I had, say, for example, if I took you there, you would be able to hear, with nothing, no sound, just the buzzing. And that sheer sort of buzzing and just listening is phenomenal. I'm one of the lucky ones too, where when I get stung multiple times, it doesn't affect me, and that happens often because I do my beekeeping generally without gloves and without a suit on, or when we've got some angry hives, I'll put the top on and I'll go in with thongs and socks and everything else, and my wife just shakes her head at me. But that's the way I do things, just that trust and that connection. So, and I think that's been a big factor, obviously, as well as, and we haven't sort of touched on that too, is through COVID not being able to leave as well, no drinking. So everything's just about healthy eating, being clean, working with it and, spending more time with the kids, building stuff. So being arty or getting out in the backyard and just being creative, as well as definitely the beekeeping.
Yeah, it's really good for the mindfulness. Now, we probably will talk about health and alcohol consumption. You and I have shared a beer before. Now, tell us about what you've done in that space with health and alcohol.
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew mentally, and not just myself. Earlier this year, it was getting the better of me, and I needed to do something. I've always been at the top of my peak fitness. Whether it's just running sort of, I won't say marathons or half marathons, but definitely some fun runs. My sport, my soccer, always played at an elite level. But yeah, just being at home, not being able to go anywhere, not even outside for walks, only in your backyard. I put on a few kgs, and drinking obviously is a bit of an issue. So yeah, in May, made a cognizant effort to stop. Haven't had a drop of alcohol since then, and don't intend to for a very long time. They say it takes 6-7 years to repair your body after alcohol, and as you know, we've probably done some damage through our time at some events. So, I'm on this journey now of hopefully, really trying to not only get better mentally, which I believe I'm, working through and then working with my team on, and anyone else that sort of comes to me in the industry now, is that, yeah, once you start a habit, so a habit sort of that 60-day type of sort of thing, I don't even miss drinking. I've been to events where people are drinking, and my wife still has a drink here or there, or wakes up, with, why did I have a drink? It's like, don't miss it. So I think physically too and mentally that has definitely helped, and I can feel that I'm sharper, a lot sharper, so much sharper that you'll see hopefully a little bit of and this is a sneak preview, a book be published soon enough, all about bees, obviously. So, there's a few things like that that have been just able to work out, smash out, and I think everyone can also see that the energy's come back. And, as long as you recognise, I guess, the issues, the pitfalls, you talk about it and you make sure you confide in people that you trust. And you trust that can give you the right sort of feedback and direction. That's the importance. That's what you definitely need to seek out.
Yeah, it sounds like it's always a journey, isn't it? And obviously, it sounds like you're doing very well on the upside of this journey. But and you're right. We do culturally, throw a beer in there every now and again, and it certainly can get out of control if it's every day and you're just in the same ground hog of inside the house and you're drinking with each other or by yourself. So I think a lot of people might be feeling that right now with the alcohol consumption.
But hey, it's a reason for a BDM to take you out for a better lunch. Just drop the alcohol and just go up the menu with prices.
Get yourself a nice steak. Fantastic. Tell us about where to from here. Sort of what have you got in big plans this year? All I can say is I'm hoping everything's opening up at the moment. And what are your thoughts, sort of in the short and medium term from here with the work and home?
Look, we'll go back to the office 1 or 2 days a week. We're trying already. The challenge is, and again with people working, we're coming back into school holidays. Are people going to be back at home because of the children are back at home? We've got school holidays upon us. Childcare's a lot harder to come by. We've been lucky enough to have an au pair, previously who's gone home to the UK. So finding that paid help, and trusting them, or the right checks for us, that's where we're at. And I think a lot of Victorians are at the same sort of circumstance that I've spoken to, is that everyone wants to get back to normal, but normal, like, there's a lot of part of the industry that would normally support our normal life that has now disappeared. So there's a lot of challenges, I guess, in now sort of reaching out and sort of getting that help. So, we're lucky to have found some help, leading to the year, but that's not going to fix up sort of next year and beyond. So from that point of view, yeah, I'd love to get back. But again, everyone I've spoken to, even from BDM world, support world, they're not even going back into the office. So they're sort of just doing a few lunches and that here and there. But even their motivation to head to the city to do stuff, it's also dwindling and it's sort of gone. So yeah, there's a lot of motivation just been ripped out of people in Melbourne, and maybe we have just gotten too used to sort of just being at home and around, I guess, whether it's friends, family, and I've got my wife's side here, obviously, but or just wanting to spend more time with the kids, but outside, because technically the kids are also the ones that have lost out hugely, and I can see that, in my kids, they want to go to the zoo, the aquariums, like there's been 12 months of nothing. So, there's a lot of that aspect of things now. And even my daughter, 2 years lost of swimming, she wants to do swimming lessons. It's like, you're right, we've got to try and get her into swimming lessons, but even struggling to do that because there's just hardly anything around. So there's a lot of strain, I guess, in respect to, all those different areas at the moment, which I think you're still going to see a lot of people sort of struggle with.
Yeah, it's a rebuilding, conversation, isn't it? And bouncing, forward. I think Sam Cawthorne used to say, you don't want to bounce back to where you were before. You want to bounce forward to the new normal. And I think we're all on that journey of rebuilding that and to what that might look like. So I don't think it'll look like what it used to. It'll be a new thing, and hopefully we can build it in the way we want it to be.
That's it. I think I'll have a lot more people come and visit me and jump into bee suit. So there's been a lot of talk about that. So when that starts to happen, or Fraser, when you're down here, mate, we'll get the XY team down in some bee suits.
Excellent. And if you want to check out Shane in the bee suit, you probably better to find him on TikTok than any other medium. Is that right?
That's it. We've got a lot of TikToks these days. It's all about bees. So yeah, and even my daughter, she's 6. She's got her own bee suit, so she's always in there helping us out as well.
Fantastic. Shane, thanks so much for coming on and chatting to us today about work, but also the mental health journey that a lot of advisors and planners are on, and just sort of bringing that up. And I think we should talk about it, and thank you for coming on and telling us about your story. If somebody wants to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Look, they can reach out professionally through my email. My mobile's on there, or it's all on LinkedIn as well. So all my contact details are all out there.
Fantastic. Shane, thank you so much.
Thank you.